那个包括台剧包括那个台湾丝袜合唱，长春长兴都在上面丝袜工会和总干事也在上面。
好，差不多了哈。
Hi, all my friends. Thank you very much to join the meeting. I will introduce Professor Ma. He will hold the meeting of this conference, and President Chairman Tao Ming of PIAT, and Li Xiong Liu from VP of Dow Jones OPIS. And let's have your hands to welcome Dr. Ma to hold the meeting.
Good morning, everyone. Distinguished speakers, honored guests, we will start this morning's presentation and also discussion. And the main theme of today's meeting is the Beyond the Moon, re-evaluating the future of Asian petrochemical value chains. And we have 4 distinguished speakers from Malaysia, Singapore, and China, and our guests from major Taiwan chemicals companies and petrochemical companies. So welcome everyone. Then we will welcome Mr. Chow, the president of the Taiwan Petrochemical Association. Mr. Chow first.
Okay, shall we start?
Yeah.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to see all of you joining us today. On behalf of the Petrochemical Industry Association of Taiwan, I want to thank for our partners, TCIA and the Dow Jones Company, for bringing us together for this important discussion. The theme of today's webinar, Beyond the Boom, Re-evaluating the future of ASEAN petrochemical value chains, is very timely. With global politics shifting again under the new U.S. administration, our industry is facing a lot of uncertainty from trade politics, from supply chain adjustments. Those changes affect every company as their petrochemical value chain, including those here in Taiwan. That's why today's lineup of speakers is especially valuable. They will help us understand what these developments really mean for the economy, for trading flows, and for long-term industry trends. More importantly, they offer perspective on how we can respond, how we can stay flexible, manage risks, and find new opportunities even in a challenging environment. For Taiwan's petrochemical industry, staying connected with global insights is critical. We are a key part of the regional supply chain, and our competitiveness depends on how quickly we adapt and how we plan for the future. Thank you again for being here. Let's have a productive conference. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will invite Mr. Liu from the office, Dow Jones Chemicals. He will give speak. Welcome, Mr. Liu.
谢谢。尊敬的曹理事长，尊敬的马理事长、郑秘书长以及各位的来宾，非常感谢大家拨出宝贵的时间参与今天的活动。那我今天非常感谢台湾化学产业协会呢，这诚挚邀请道琼斯能源联合主办今天这个研讨会。那今天其实我们所要讨论的课题呢，其实都围绕于目前整个亚太区化工市场的情况。那我们大家也知道，过去的几年的确不容易。整个亚洲石化产业呢，已经逐步开始走出疫情的那种情况。然而，当我们快要进入高成长阶段的时候呢，我们显然已经进入更复杂而不确定的一个新周期。大家也不会陌生的所谓的供给过剩的情况啊，然后下游需求持续体现比较薄弱的情况再加上目前过去的1-2年进入川普2.0的那个周期，那我们看到非常多的那个地缘政治的一些情况，包括政治风险、政策改变。美国在进入川普2.0的那个阶段呢，进入更强调国家安全还有产业保护的那个政策的方向。在这种大环境之下呢，全球的贸易跟能源市场，我们的供应链正处于一个新的一个格局，那就是正处于碎片化。那通过这个特朗普的2.0，川普2.0的情况呢，我们可以看到是说，除了关税。除了一系列不同国家的一些制裁、能源政策改变，包括最近期美国对委内瑞拉石油政策，也逐渐的会影响到所有的能源与原料的供应链。那对于亚洲石化产业的意义呢，就是说过去的出口的成长，我们非常依赖中国大陆那边的一些需求，然而这种情况已不再是理所当然，我们必须重新要调整。然后审视我们企业的一些策略，然后呢，也会在今天有几个议题呢，我们会深入的研究。那包括我们今天所讨论的，不仅是单单只是价格跟短期的市场的一些价格的一些浮动，而且我们还要重新审视整个亚洲石化那个供应链长期的那个需求来的一个定位，还有一个准确的策略。那我们从今天会从政策、宏观环境。贸易变动，还有平衡的那个结构呢，还有石化的需求，会做4个层面不同的方向作为进行深入的探讨。那最后呢，也想跟大家分享一下，我们道琼斯能源CMA Opus 一直秉于我们的一个理念，提供横跨能源、原料、化工市场以及全球数据的一些洞察。一些活动，那我们希望通过今天的活动呢，可以协助企业更全面、从数据导向的一个视觉呢，走出更具前瞻性还有策略投资的决策。那最后呢，想跟大家分享一下，就是说我们在今年3月25跟26日会在美国德州伍德兰会举办我们世界化工大会，俗称 World Chemical Forum WCF。那个时候呢，我们将会提供能源还有化工行业所有的深度洞察，还有全球视野。希望通过那个WCF 那个全球施工化工大会呢，可以提供不单单只是在美洲、欧洲，甚至在亚洲，想提供更加多的一些不同视野。然后到最后呢，我就想再次感激台湾。石油化学协会这些诚挚的邀请，然后我们今天道琼斯所有的那个专家呢，会尽我们的能力提供大家不同的洞察，还有深入的探讨。谢谢。
谢谢。
李处长在线上要不要请他？
谢谢刘总裁的这个介绍跟支持。那我们今天呢报名的有超过100位，线上的有80位。那么我们等一下会有4位非常杰出的这个 speaker， 他们会分别有这一些题目来跟我们分享。好， 那接下来我们就请秘书长来介绍今天主要的参加者贵宾。
那我想今天主要参加者是这一次的会议是由石化工会加台湾化学产业协会再加上 Office Dow Jones 这个合办这个会议那我想今天会议的参加的人是非常多，那逐渐会一直往上在增加那因为有些人是可能还在 set up 他的那个 camera， 那我想我们就开始，那我不再一一介绍那我想最主要我要邀请我们的理事长陈伟旺理事长，请你跟大家讲一下 open remarks。理事长，
陈理事长。
是各位主讲嘉宾，各位
Please open your
参与者
open the camera and give us some open remarks.
我说话
Then we
听得
will
到
have
吗？
a photo， 可以听得到可以听到Then we will have a group photo after your remarks.
是各位演讲嘉宾以及各位出席的业界先进，很感恩能够在今年一开春的时候有这么一个重量级的，而且是国际性的一个研讨会，让我们可以站在这一些专家的高度视野，帮助我们去厘清混沌的产业环境，更帮助我们确认我们往下战略选择采取正确的方向，不用过度的担心，但是也不应该保守而无所作为。个人也是非常的期待能够在今天的会议当中有所学习，有所成长。Okay, dear honored guest speakers, we are so pleased to have you with us today as we are just opening up 2026 in the midst of all the anxiety and uncertainty. We look forward to learning from you, from your perspectives, and from your information so that we can make our strategic decisions more effectively. Of course, we need to be cautious, but we don't want to overly concerned. And we believe after today's exchange of ideas, collectively, we can pave the path for the near future as a chemical industry as a whole. Thank you. 好嘞，你们麦克风关掉咯，秘书处那边，你把自己的麦克风关掉了。秘书处，你的麦克风关掉了，有没有听到我的声音？
谢谢，我刚对，好，那我们现在就先做一个大合照那请请大家把那个 camera open 几位讲师，请几位讲师speakers Ashley Pujari, William Chen,
Alan Wei and Miss Lin. Yes.
We are all here.
Okay. Miss Lin, Mr. Wei.
Pujari.
Okay.
好，那我们大家 please have a great smile.
Okay, we will count to
Okay,
3,
thank
2,
you.
1. Smile.
Okay.
好，谢谢。好，
接下来请秘书长稍微简单介绍我们今天的。
好，那我们今天的那个参加了公司很多，现在因为 就是到今天早上还继续有在报名，所以我们大概预计是，因为有些公司是开在他的公司的会议室，所以说可能就会有的是可能十几个人看一个 camera， 看一个那个用一个用一个那个进来哈。那我们今天的会议是有马正基副理事长、曹明理事长。还有那个刘立雄，那个 VP Head of Sales Business Development OPS at Dow Jones Company 哦，那我们的报告人刚刚已经讲了好几次。那这一次的所有参加的是有陈伟旺理事长、林清洲副理事长、曾家雄总经理是国小石化，曾家雄总经理、甘凯恩总经理是中华化学，何立新总干事是石化工会的总干事啊，金寿是 Executive Director， 他是从新加坡上来，在线上，他也是跟我一起 organize 这个会议的哈。那在下面是林国简经理是上委，那林仲祥是大连化学啊，林伟全大连化学，陈国正副科长大连哈，那蔡文志是中石化哈啊，台湾石化合成哈，那个台塑石化哦，庄中县苏宜丹，那我就没有在下面我可能就不要一一唱名哈，那因为参加了会议的人100多位哦，那台塑石化哦，苏宜丹、林生达、徐正孝哦，黄玄瑞哦，那个台塑总管理处哈。陈曾国荣，因为他这个是那个，再往下哦，再来 Sherry 哈、是台剧计划科长哈、那台剧的社环处林宗义、林玉婷，那个中油的林玉婷、董远元、陈建成、黄正彦哦，曾家瑶哈。詹正训组长哈，张组长哈，这非常年轻的组长林伟荣、陈朝玉、简玉君哦，洪念慈、许嘉玲哦，洪伟伦，台湾石化合成哈。肖淑印我靠，他是专门做那个就是具有氟化学品的容器哈。那周俊志那钟志毅是银创公司的总经理哈，赖威宇 ERM， 吴佩霞ERM，Kevin Young Deputy 西门子的哈，江立峰、李长荣陈义凯是李长荣吴宏仪副总是吴副总也是我们的老朋友写词郭元忠副总经理是宏达，他是做C9、C5、C9 ，Catherine Win 长春石化。姬树生长春石化，李俊宇长春石化，吴印忠长春石化，南亚是李伯章、吴淑婷工程师，还有李伯章工程师，再往下。好，再来南亚赵之畅的是他是招商副理事，是总经理级的哦。洪德旺组长、胡世仪研究机长、张志强这些哦，谢谢那个公园我的老朋友哈，林志荣组长中继社洪玉婷郭博尧林子祥塑胶中心的哈，杨峰浩这个是国小石化，李浩嘉国小石化，苏庆龙总经理哈，刘文荣副总陈应嘉还有邱义静哈，这两位都是氟化学品的哈，氟化学条例那邱义志，台湾中华化学 FHU 甘生元李冠业中华化学。彭子若、王雀祥董事长景电黄志雄经理这个婷姐是设备的仪器的周淑英联成化学郭思英林陈一豪陈思婷再往下，
应该有。
中业这个是Akema 台湾
谢谢。
这个威廉这
没问题的。刚你怎么进去我不管。
徐立修三网化工事实上是我老朋友了曾中信虎文科技协理王昭斌炼油厂MEU 博瑞达应用，这是一个这个 agency 在杨金杰 Bell President 王振中、黄庆南、朱宇芳总干事是老朋友了，塑胶工会总干事是吴宇轩吴其达林俊荣、姚兴副总，这都是那个星光合成公司哈。事实上太多了哈，念不完了，不好意思哈。那谢谢各位的话一起参加好，那我马教授。
好，时间的关系呢，我们马上进入到第一个speaker。The first speaker, Mr. Ajit Pujari, is the Vice President of Asia Aromatics and Fiber. The topic of his presentation is global economies and the impact of Trump 2.0. Let's welcome Mr. Ashish Pujari.
Good morning, everyone.
Please be louder. Your voice louder.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, good, quite good.
Okay. So, good morning, everyone. And first of all, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to present our views. What we have done today over the next course of 4 presentations is, rather than going into individual value chains, we will present topics that are very much important across the petrochemical industry. And so that you can assess how is the impact going to be on your own business. And if you have any value chain specific questions, we would be happy to take them offline or at the end of our today's session. Today we have presenters from aromatics, olefins, polymers. So all our experts are available on this call. With that, let me begin by sharing my screen first. Sorry. I hope my screen is visible to everyone.
Quite clear.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So I'll speak in English. My Chinese is pretty poor, as you can imagine. And I will try to speak slowly so that we can understand all the messages that we want to share with you on the global economic outlook. I believe Liu already talked about this, but let me once again reiterate that our flagship event, which is the World Chemical Forum, will be held in Houston on March 25th and 26th. And we encourage you to go and attend that. It will be a 2-day event, which will broadly speak about all major themes that are impacting the petchem sector. And of course, we will also cover individual value chains in a separate, online fashion. So do register. Liu and his team would be ready to welcome you there. Okay, let's talk about petrochemicals or the chemicals value chain before we jump into the economic forecast. And the reason why we tend to show this slide at the beginning is just take a step back and look at how chemicals are really helping us improve the quality of life. We start with natural resources, feedstocks that really are really cheap in value, I would say. But we convert them into molecules and into final products that have improved our way of life. Without chemicals, the growth of the global economy, the way it is today, none of the industry would have come to the levels where it is today. So whether it is construction, whether it is automotives, textiles, packaging, and even healthcare, without the advent of chemicals, it will not be possible for us to live the way of life that we know today. So as we continue to grow, as world value continues to grow, way of life, chemicals will continue to play a very important role, and that we have an important role to sort of help grow the economy as well. Okay, with that, let's turn on to the economic outlook. And I begin by saying this, it's a catchy phrase. It's life is not a matter of holding good cards, but it's playing a poor hand well. And that sort of explains where economy is doing today. It's not excellent, extremely good, but it depends on how you come out of today's economic situation in different countries. So just to begin with, this is our forecast, and along with the source is Oxford Economics, which is our partner, and we take their outlook while making our chemical outlooks. And it's sort of a outlook that is kind of going into more volatility, and volatility that is sort of induced by policy volatility. And that is sort of pushing into lower growth momentum. So when you look at 2026 outlook, the overall global growth is expected to be slightly lower than 2025. Although in Q4 2025 we had probably this extremely low growth. From that point onwards, it is going to go up, but on an annual basis, we will end up being lower than last year. US actually is expected to turn out to be very good growth, jumping up to almost 2.3%. And the reason behind that are two pro. Number one is that inflation has still not, it has come under control. And despite the tariff threats, it hasn't really gone out of control. Okay. Number two also is that President Trump's the one big beautiful bill has sort of put more dollars into consumers' hands, and that will, and it's a consumer economy that will entice more people to spend through this year. And as you can imagine, the impact of the last 2 days developments where President Trump is talking about capping interest rates on credit card bills. If that does go through, then of course consumer spending will be grow even faster through 2026. Unfortunately, Europe is a weak spot, and despite all of the negative impact that APAC is going to see, APAC will still remain one of the fastest growth region. So on the chart, if you see, the way it has the size of the bubble shows the size of the economy. So US, is the largest economy, which and is growing at about 2.3%, and it's sitting above zero, which means its growth in 2026 is going to be faster than in 2025. Unlike that, both China and India, which are two of the largest economies in Asia, the growth in 2026 is forecast to be lower than last year. Although it is still faster than the global growth, it is still one of the fastest growth that we have seen everywhere. But it's going to be slower than what we saw in the last year. The next slide shows economists have different views, and what Oxford Economics has done is they're showing us, okay, this is our forecast, which is the bar, and the consensus forecast. So Oxford Economics is showing above consensus forecast growth for both China and the US. In the US, if you see, the economic growth projection ranges from anywhere between 1.5 to 2.5, and Oxford Economics is probably towards the high end of that consensus range. But in other cases, they are showing much lower forecast than some of the other global economists out there. Generally speaking, the global growth rate, there is sort of an agreement that we will see about maybe 2.5, 2.6% next year, as I said in my previous slide. Let's talk about the summary of the economic outlook first, and then we will jump into what does it mean for Asia. So what is the big picture? The big picture is, as we get into 2026, the global economy has actually sort of is sort of stabilizing after the initial shock of the Liberation Day tariffs. While the worst case scenario has been avoided, still Asia faces a structurally higher cost of trade and rapidly fragmenting geopolitical order. And just latest announcements by US of a 25% tariff on anybody doing business with Iran, that sort of announcement has still not been factored in today's forecast outlook. The US policy has shifted from strategic competition to universal reciprocity. You know, same time last year, the baseline tariffs were zero, but now there is a minimum baseline tariff of 10%, and 10 to 20% is sort of the range that they are looking at as a new normal. Again, this has not yet fully factored into inflation in the US, but there is a big chance that because of increase in tariffs over the next 1 or 2 years, there will be a one-time increase in inflation because of this. So how has Asia responded? Well, the reality is split. Southeast Asia is actually, drifting economically closer to China and to preserve its supply chains, while Japan, Korea, North Asia is trying to manage its relations with Washington. So generally, they wanted to push everybody away from China, but unfortunately, these tariffs have pushed some countries closer to China rather than away from them. 2026 outlook, as we said, is moderate, but it's uneven. And the primary risk now is not if tariff will happen, but for Asia, it is about transshipment rules. Because what is happening is if you produce in China, but you ship out of Malaysia or Vietnam, you end up paying an even higher tariff of 40 to 60%. So what's the economic doctrine, for Trump 2.0? The first major policy shift since January 2025, they went to a new baseline of reciprocal tariffs announced in April, but broadly implemented by Q3 2025. Most Asian countries are now at a baseline tariff of 10 to 20% to the US. Of course, China is higher, and India is even higher at about 50%. But that's sort of the penal tariffs that the US has put on these economies. The more important push right now is on this transshipment crackdown, which means just to avoid higher tariffs from places like India and China, if you want to take the product to a third economy and then export from there, that is bound. The US authorities are looking at it more closely and taking actions to prevent that, and have announced much higher tariffs on anything that is being transshipped, which is actually the number one risk for several ASEAN manufacturers, whether it is Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam, so on and so forth. Energy and sanctions is again another key element. We've, about 2 weeks ago, we saw that the US gave a green light of potentially up to 500% tariffs on nations that were buying Russian crude oil. And now, in the last 2 days, US has announced a 25% tariff on anybody doing business with Iran. Now, that implementation is still unclear, but they are very adamant that will be imposed. So these sanctions are really going to change every time, and the baseline changes as tariff is being used to sort of align everybody with US view rather than on the other side. Just as a comparison, I thought this slide is important for all of us who are outside of the US. Just to take a look at what is the import tariff that US imposes on the country versus what is the import tariff that the country imposes on US. So, for example, if you look at China, which is on the right hand side here, you will see that US tariff on China is close to about 28 to 30%, while Chinese tariff on the US is also almost same, almost 32%. Now, this is weighted average tariff. As against that, if you take a look at the extreme right and look at Taiwan, the import tariff on Taiwanese goods into the US is close to between 5 to 6%, while anything imported by Taiwan from the US is coming at almost 0%. So in most of the countries, the reciprocal countries actually imposing way lower tariffs on the US goods than the other than vice versa. And this is completely different now than what it was before 2025. So what's the Asian regional outlook? Now, Asia, as we have seen, is now become a two-speed economy. There are countries like China, ASEAN, India, where the growth is above global average. China is stabilizing at around 4%. ASEAN is in the 4 to 5% range. India is in the 6.5%. While developed Asia, which is Japan, Korea, is lagging, is stagnating, I would say, at 1 to 2% growth. And the key drivers and risks are mentioned here. I would like to mention about China here, where the anti-involution policy is something that the government is trying to do to avoid price wars. Just to make sure that people or the producers don't produce indiscriminately and end up not making money at all. But the key risk to that is that there will be structurally lower exports because of this, and reliance on domestic stimulus kind of continues to remain high over the next few years. I won't go through the other details here. It's mentioned here, and you will get a slide shortly afterwards. The other key element was acceleration of China plus one. And the China plus one, while the US goal was to push everybody away from China, a lot of ASEAN countries are being pushed closer to Beijing because of these tariff wars. The winners in this were Vietnam and Malaysia, where electronic exports or semiconductor inflows, went up in 2025. But remember, the transshipment rules are also going to impact negatively on these winning economies. The losers are import competing domestic manufacturers. So what is happening is, as the goods get barred from the US, cheap Chinese goods or others, these producers are now flooding Asian local markets. And this is impacting the local small and medium enterprises in countries like Indonesia, Thailand, and several other Southeast Asian countries, even including in India, where we have seen a lot of dumping by cheap manufactured goods coming from China. So what is basically Trump's policy? You have to look at it on two fronts. Number one, he has a domestic agenda. And the domestic agenda is three major things they want to achieve. One is they want to achieve border security and deportations. So no, they don't want any illegal people to remain in the US. Second, he wants to push for more government and manufacturing efficiency and competitiveness. So make America great again is by way of manufacturing. And third, they want to maintain the tech leadership that America has, including the AI thing. On the foreign agenda, he is trying to get hold of the whole oil equation. And you've seen that with actions in Venezuela and now possible actions in Iran as well. And trade war 2.0 is basically about decreasing the world dependence on China and increasing onshoring of goods into the US. And he has used sanctions against anything or anybody that do not align with US views. So these are the 6 points, both in domestic and foreign agenda, and they will continue to define how the policy in the Trump administration develops. Now, one of my colleagues, Sinwei, is going to talk more on this, but before I concluded, I thought I would once again come back to chemicals and see why chemicals are so much important. Number one, that there is going to be growth in consumer demand. First is we need to be aware that global population continues to grow on a steady trajectory. More than 1.5 new inhabitants will be there in the next 25 years. In the year 2000, almost 50% of global households were categorized as lower income category. And now, by 2050, we expect that less than 20% will be. So the population's, income potential or income is also increasing at a much rapid pace than the population growth, which means that the base chemical consumption per capita, it has now the history that we have seen over the last 25 years. We should continue to see a similar trajectory in the next 25 years as well. And the last point would be, well, chemicals is important, but when you look at the total demand of material, which is on the right hand pie chart, you will see that chemicals and plastics and fibers of everything that the world consumes, we only account for less than 1 or about 1%. So which means that the opportunity for chemicals to participate in growth in the future is even higher. So that is one positive thing I wanted to end my presentation with. And lastly, I will say on key takeaways, whatever we have talked about economy. First is volatility will remain and it will be highly volatile. So hedge your positions. Don't depend on one country to take all your material. Look into intra-Asia. US consumer market is going to shrink for Asian exporters. So you really have to move away into different markets. And US policy rules can change overnight. So maintain flexible logistics. So if you are shipping into the US, if tomorrow they close down the market, you will need to have an option to look at other markets as well. So Asia markets continue to provide fastest growth, but focus is changing more on regional rather than purely export oriented. And US GDP in 2026, actually, despite all of these tariffs, will be higher than what we have seen in 2025. With that, thank you so much. We will take Q&A, I believe, at the latest towards the end of the presentations. And with that, I will pass this back to you. Sorry, you're on mute. Maybe the next speaker I can introduce would be William. I think you are on mute.
We will have a Q&A later.
Q&A after full presentation. Thank you. Yeah.
And there will be a panel discussion after the
Yes,
presentation.
So I can pass on to my colleague,
Mr.
William
William
Chen.
Chen.